right. Welcome to Medical Monday here. This week we're going to be going over stress. Stress is a very oftentimes we encounter it, and there's three big ways you can encounter stress.
Yes, there are three major types of stress. We have toxins, which are like chemicals. So toxic stressors. We have physical stressors, which are going to be more or less like a trauma of some sort. And then we also have emotional stressors from a psychological aspect where we can hold on to things or even put ourselves through additional stress that's not necessary when we're in specific type situations.
Call it the
three T's.
Three T's.
Oh, the three T's.
The trauma, toxins, and thoughts.
Yes. And so what those stressors lead to are down the line additional stressors or even ailments. There have been studies that have shown stress related problems resulting in some pretty severe conditions similar to heart disease, cancer, things like that. So it can result in some significant things.
And we've seen that in previous Medical Mondays. We talk about some of the coping mechanisms as far as if you don't have good ones with back pain, then the back pain stays around much longer because you just don't have those coping mechanisms, oftentimes because of stress.
Yeah.
How do we deal with stress can make other pains linger much longer and can also manifest as new pains just because of the stress of the big threes, your emotions, the toxins, and of course traumas.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that because a lot of times we'll see patients with knee pain and then we learn that they had back pain many, many years before the knee pain showed up. Or the other way around, we have patients with low back pain and they're like, oh, well, my knee hurts. And the knee pain was there from a trauma many, many years ago before. So, excuse me. So it is funny that you mentioned that because sometimes it can just fruition into a different type of physical stress or a different type of emotional stress, depending on what caused it. And so speaking of physical stressors, that's one of the first things we can talk about. There's different causes for those stressors. Oh, wait, we forgot to talk about the definition of stress.
What is stress itself?
Jumping ahead, I'm just in a hurry. So the definition of stress, absolutely. Let me get my slides here. All right, stress is a noun. Pressure or tension exerted on a material object. Pressure or tension exerted on a material object. So that's an example of a physical stress. A state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting in adverse or very demanding circumstances. So almost like an emotional stress where you're under a lot of pressure there. And in the action, verb, subject to pressure or tension. So when we talk about it, if we want to talk about physics, all of a sudden, go back to high school and talk about physics. Yeah. When you put pressure on a stick or a certain type of stress on a stick, it will eventually break when it reaches that point.
And we see that with the body. So there's the physical stress you can place on the body will cause damage. The emotional stress that you put on the body has a reaction also, just as much as anything else in the body. There's always a reaction because of the stress. And the stress releases other hormones. The stress releases multiple things throughout the body that can cause problems.
Yes, they can. And one of them being physical stressors, which I tried to jump ahead to a moment ago.
There's
physical stressors. Many, many, many of us have experienced a car accident. That is a type of physical stress. And we might not have any problems right at that moment that we experience, but it can actually accrue as time goes by. Actually, shortly after I started here, I had, I call it a love tap. Somebody actually just literally just bumped my bumper very, very slightly. I was like, don't worry about it. I'm fine. There was just a scratch on the bumper. But the next morning I had to text Doc and I had to like, can I come in to get adjusted? Because I could feel it. The stress from that little bitty tap on my vehicle
was enough.
Yes, it was enough.
We look at this person right here above us. We see this a lot. There's stress on the neck because you're bent over. Now, you may not feel that pressure at the one time towards enough pain where you're going to want something to help. But over time, that stress will build up to where then you do want some help.
Yep.
These guys, that's instant pain right there. They want help immediately.
Yes.
But this sometimes over time will cause pain.
Yeah, a chronic activity. Those of us that work at a desk space, a very similar space set out all the time. If you answer the phone on the same side all the time, over an extended period of time,
it causes stress on that one side.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's the physical stress. Physical stress is pretty easy.
Yes.
We know what that is. You trip, fall, and there's a physical stress. There's pressure put on your body from the stress, the pressure.
All right, and so one of the other ones we hit on was emotional stress. Right? A lot of times we don't understand the effects when we hold on to emotions for a long period of time. So emotional stress is another big one. It could be from negative relationships, negative work environments. There's just so many aspects to emotional
Even positive
stress.
relationships. You can put stress on yourself from trying to do the best that you can.
Yes.
So it goes both ways. You know, there's always the negative stress we think about, but even the positive stress that we put upon ourselves, your body still releases the same chemicals. So it goes both ways.
Yes, it does. So we can have different types of thoughts, positive or negative, right? If we hold ourselves to a higher standard or we have a certain goal in place, we can stress ourselves to reach that point.
Your body releases cortisol. Cortisol is one of the stress hormones that we're all familiar with, fight or flight, which is, you know, one of our natural instincts. You know, when we're stressed, what are we going to do? Are we going to run away or are we going to stay and fight?
I just did both at the same time because I wasn't sure if I was punching or if I was trying to run away. I'm not sure.
You can do both at the same time.
Yes.
But that is a natural chemical that's released in the body. And the cortisol, we know, decreases somebody's immune system. So because of that stress yourself, you're actually weakening your immune system and you're more vulnerable to disease.
That is very true. Yep. Stress hormone. I love that. That it's labeled as that too. Cortisol is a stress hormone. So there's a lot of psychological effects when we talk about emotions, but then there's also a lot of environmental effects when we talk about emotions. So there's a lot of different emotional aspects to stress, which is probably one of the more common ones that people say, oh, I'm so stressed today. One of the things to do is just know your triggers, know your limits, know your triggers, and ask for help sometimes with those.
We talk about those toxic relationships are kind of an easy one to know your triggers. Like if it's a bad relationship, you just got to get out.
You just got to get out.
And that can be with work too. Maybe work is just too much for you. It's a situation you don't want to be in that you dread every day. You know, work should be something that you enjoy and get fulfillment out of and not be a dread. If it's a dread, then it is a negative stressor on your life and you need to think about doing something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things we mentioned under emotional stressors were hormones. We have stress hormones. And so chemical stressors is another huge aspect to the body, hormones being one of them. So if your hormones are out of balance, then emotionally we can be out of balance. And there's a lot of different triggers and snowball effects is how I describe it when we talk about chemical stressors or hormonal stressors. These are typically more environmental in the fact that they're like the products we use, the foods we eat, the air we breathe. So, you know, if you don't change your air filters in your house and you know you have certain type of physical stressors that happen because of that, change your air filters very regularly. There's some that are very easy to address on a regular basis and others that might be a little bit more difficult when we talk about certain types of environmental stressors. But I know that the hormones is one that we hit on under the emotional aspect, because when our emotions are at a certain point, those hormones get released, and then chemically we have stressors that occur and they can affect other physical aspects of our body.
Just like you see on TV, there's multiple commercials. You know, it seems like every time you turn it on, there's some lawyer talking about this chemical, if you've got cancer, if you've got this, you know, those are chemical stressors on the body. They've actually caused cancer. They've stressed the body to that point. That's what we're talking about. It's, you know, the air that you breathe, you know, the amount of chemicals you ingest, whether you're just doing yard work. I know I've seen a Roundup commercial, whether you're just doing yard work and you're putting stress on your body because of that, along with the things that we eat. Are we high inflammatory diet that puts stress on your guts, that puts stress on your system to try and process those foods out of your body.
Yep. And then also the products we use. You're talking about a lot of, you know, the Roundup, things like that, but also skincare, shampoo, lotions, toothbrushes, toothpaste. You know, there's a lot of different products we use on a regular basis, even something as simple as hand sanitizer or soap. These are all types of chemical stressors that can affect
I see you in the morning you drink coffee.
I do.
Most people drink coffee.
I do.
You know, coffee is the most used crop where they have to use insecticides, pesticides on. Yep. It's the number one crop that they use pesticides and insecticides on.
It tastes good.
So
no, it doesn't.
Bottom line, get organic coffee. But that kind of leads us into what can you do to take care of this problem, this stress, whether it's from either one of these three.
Any three.
What's the big thing you need to do, Dr. Gabby?
Self-care. Yeah. Believe it or not, so many of these stressors can actually be taken care of when we talk about self-care. Find out what the triggers are. Start with one. That's all it has to do, just one. One stressor can cause a snowball effect. So what can happen when you change one of those stressors? it can cause a snowball effect in the other direction.
Yep.
So self-care is so important. So something as simple as just changing the shampoo you're using or changing your air filters on a regular basis and committing to that. Walking a few blocks every day to physically get some activity there. There's just so much that you can do on your own to help with that stress process, to remove a lot of those stressors. So physical, chemical, emotional, all of them. There's just so many little things we can do in our everyday lives to change.
Always talk about triggers.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of people talk about allergies, like, oh, I've got allergies to cats. Well, don't own a cat. The same thing applies. It's a very simple process. If it is a stress on your body, whether it's physical, you know, I got it. If you're a professional athlete, you're going to have physical stress on your body. But normal people, you know, we can avoid this stress on our body by being careful, not tripping and falling, you know, using good safety precautions when we're on a ladder, you know, obviously driving defensively. A lot of things physically that we can take care of as the average person. Then we talk about toxins and emotional stress. Those two are very identifiable to where you as a patient can remove that from your life to where you're not having stress.
Yes, that's very, very true. And
We
then-
got a plant here watering themselves. And we think about taking care of yourself as making sure you're getting exercise, make sure you're getting some sun. They're taking care of themselves. But what you notice in this pot, there's not a single weed there. All right. He or she has removed that from their life.
Yep.
And that is very key to this whole stress situation oftentimes we place on ourselves.
Yes, that's very, very true. And those emotional stressors, we choose our emotional stressors. We choose to stress out about those things that we want to, whether it be, you know, taking care of mom, taking care of neighbors, siblings, you know, family being distant. That's something I deal with on a regular basis. And so it is something that I choose to stress out about if something were to happen or has happened. So, you know, we definitely get to choose our battles, and you just have to weed them out. Just like you said, weed them out, and it makes life so much easier to breathe through. And then, you know, there's a lot of things that we can't do at home in regards to certain self-care, certain services. And so that's what we specialize in. That's what we're here for, are those stressors, primarily physical, but there are some chemical stressors we can help with as well. But physical stressors that you just can't quite get those breakthroughs with, whether it be chronic pain issues from old injuries, chronic stress problems, like I talked about the ergonomics at work. If you're in the same position working 10 hours a day, you're likely going to have some stress that has built up. And so sometimes we need help with that. And that's what we specialize in regards to the chiropractic care, the regenerative medicine, and a lot of other services here in the office.
And part of that, you know, we talk about the big fours that we do in the office, you know, the regenerative medicine, the chiropractic care. But one of the big ones is health education.
Yes,
And part of that
huge.
is your gut-brain connection. A lot of people don't understand the connection, or they're just unfamiliar with it because it's not readily talked about. We can help with that in numerous ways.
Yes, in numerous ways. We actually have a gut reset program that specializes in helping to normalize those hormones, getting the thyroid stable, and also just helping floralize and refloralize the gut, so that when we talk about those stress hormones, the body's better supported to produce that and not add additional physical stress in those organs and systems. So yes, you are correct.
A lot of the stress that we put on our body is from what we eat. You know, that was what we shown on an earlier slide. It is the hot dog, or, you know, the high inflammatory diet. The things that we eat causes this internal stress of your body. And you know, when you're having stress, if you get a phone call, you know, if something happened to a loved one, that's stress that you know. You feel that and you know it's there.
Yep.
But when you're eating a hot dog, you don't know the stress is there, but your body feels the stress. So that's that connection that we really need to try and break through to where we can alleviate that internal stress that oftentimes patients may not know. And it will manifest later on as, I've got this pain, I've got this condition, and there's a connection.
Yes, huge one. And that was a great example, a great explanation there. So I'm not even going to try and explain that further. So that is so true, because a lot of times we don't feel the stressors or the effects of the stressors that we do to our bodies. So absolutely. I love
You only got one body. You got to love it and do the best you can
Yes.
with it.
And-
So don't put stress on your body. We talked about the big three. You know, there's physical, emotional, and chemical.
Yes.
Those are very treatable by just taking them away from the situation.
Yes.
All right. I hope you guys learned a lot about stress today.
Yes, that's one of our big four, right? Education,
Health
patient
education.
education is so important for both of us. That's why we keep recording these Medical Mondays.
And we'll see you next Monday.
Yes,
all right.
we will. Bye.